Welcome to the show. Today we have Amy Hillman. You work in the supervisor's office in our local town. And you might be like, okay, why is she here? Well, she's kind of a genius. And you help with elections. And so many people, including myself, I know that I have to register to vote, which in Michigan, they pretty much register you automatically. So really didn't have to put much effort into that. And then you go and vote. But what happens before and after that?
There's a ton. There's an absolute ton of stuff that happens.
And, a common thing that I get on the daily, people in my comment section all the time say, well, voting doesn't matter.
Oh, it absolutely matters. We've proved that every election.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I really think it's almost a propaganda that's purposely been planted to get people not to vote. I don't know. Maybe that's a little conspiratorial, but
no, I would say that has probably been said to me by a voter at almost every election I've worked since 1999.
Wow.
And so we have an inherent kind of, what's going on behind the scenes, distrust for things, especially with government. And because of social and behavioral norms now, we have such an interaction with the federal and the mass stage of things, is that federal politics really does spill over onto local politics. But one of the great things is that in our small town, we have a time to actually interact with our voters and encourage them to sit and watch the process, which is something that you can do at any election in any polling location. There is a designated area always to be able to watch the process.
Wow,
you can
I had
watch
no
us
idea.
work all night long until we shut the doors, absolutely, from start to finish.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I got to do that sometime.
Yeah.
I'll bug you.
It's a great day. We have a great time. And I'm really fortunate to have worked in elections here in my own town for 26 years. And the deputy clerk that is in charge of the administration, the voters registration, and all of the prepping and the absent voter ballots, she is absolutely fantastic and has been there for 19 years.
Yeah.
So we have a consistent product, which we are very fortunate for. And I can say, and I am proud to say, that we definitely are one of the communities that sets the bar for elections in our county. We have been able to provide a consistent product to our voters, and we have streamlined the way that they vote, which also gives people a sense of security when they're able to navigate the voting process easily and simply, like straight line. So we've always strived to provide them a straight line, easily guided by our election inspectors, as well as any signage or just exactly how we've set up the voting booths to move them all the way through the process. It allows for them to observe all the way down the line, as all of our election inspectors sit along the line of the front and the back.
Well, let me just say, just with me running, people might remember, like I ran for local office, but I live in two different towns technically. So I was running for the other office. So I wasn't running in the one that you are in. The one you help runs incredibly. Like, like we are very lucky. I never have to go to meetings or anything because I know you guys are doing your job and it's much appreciated.
Another great thing about administration in a small town.
Yeah. And I had to get a ton, when I was running for office, I had to go to your office to turn in everything. And it was a very smooth process. If I had a question, I could ask it. I had to request a ton of records. And I was just given them. It's crazy. I request records from the state, from my village, from the federal government, from other states. And I have never gotten records so easily and for free, typically, from my town. So it's a great process.
Well, that's all in the same office.
Yeah.
So you have the same great people that give you great elections, giving you great FOIA availability documents, permanent documents, building, zoning, planning. You have a lot of wealth within these two people that have invested decades into their community. So
Which I also think this is just a good lesson for some people, because a lot of people only think about the president in government. And it's like, we have
Yes.
so much government. I'm going to make a chart one of these days of how much government we have.
Any of the discussions I've ever had where people say, well, voting doesn't matter, I always tell them, if you don't know who to vote for the president, you should at least vote for your local elections.
Yes.
Because I can show you exactly where your vote matters and why you absolutely have to do that. It's the first rung in the ladder of government. It's the first government entity that touches your life.
Yep.
So when you're talking about your budgets, water systems, parks, all of the administration and the budgeting that goes in with that, especially elections. So like our township provides election services for our village as well. So we have the 4 precincts that encompasses the entire population.
So let's go through kind of before and after the election. Because like I said, I feel like me as a voter, just walk in, vote, leave, and just trust that everything's hunky-dory.
Right.
But walk me through, okay? Like, I don't know if we have an election coming up this year, but...
So we just had 3 last year, and actually we have 30 voters that have to vote in a school election in a neighboring county, because
Really?
we're right there on the edge of 2 counties. We share a boundary. And so like our office will be open all day tomorrow because it's mandatory in Michigan election law that we are open the Saturday prior to the election. So any registered voter and any resident, really, because we're open, can come in and inquire and get their absent voter ballot that day, or they can register to vote that day, since our state does allow registration now, even on election day. But there is requirements for that, and the identification that's required for a proper voter's registration.
And I will say, we are in Michigan, so every state is different. That's what something that many people may not realize, is that every state has their own, election process. And so there's not many federal rules about elections, which is why we're going to talk about Trump's executive order, and he's getting in trouble about it because he made an executive order about securing our elections, and states are already suing. I think you said ours is suing him
Along with 18 others.
Yeah. And it's because they're like, this is our thing. Like, we can determine elections however we want. So, so every state's a little bit different, but we had a Democrat Congress and governor. So if you are in a blue state, it's probably very similar to what you're dealing with. We have like massive mail-in ballot. We have extra days of voting, stuff like that.
And that's all recently changed within the last few election cycles.
Yeah. And so some red states, if you're listening, like, may not be very similar, but I want to get into the nitty gritty too of like how are election workers even hired and stuff. So
when I started administrating elections, it was 2003 when I was hired in as the deputy clerk. And at that time, the sitting clerk had already been in her position for 4 years. So she already had a couple of elections under her belt. And luckily, she's fantastic with administration. So she was able to learn that quite quickly. There is a lot of education that is available from our state election commission as well as our county. So you can go to our county elections and get all of the education that is needed, even as a resident, if you go and volunteer to become an election inspector. So each community is different with that as well. Some are volunteer positions, some are paid positions, and each CVT gets to decide what they pay their election inspectors. When I came in 2003, we had some very well-established election inspectors that had been doing this for many decades. Fabulous people in our community that had been integral to many facets of making our community what it is today. And so I was able to interact with the established election inspectors and start to bring in some of the other members of the community that I was associated with that had strong administration skills, good customer service, and personalities that I knew would mesh well, and leadership skills that would enable us to take over these positions and have people really own it. So
And
we
what does
were
an election inspector do?
so an election inspector is the woman or the man that you go and get your ballot from.
Okay.
Those are election inspectors. They're the poll workers for the day.
Okay.
Some will help with us our setup because we have to put all the booths together and have that all set up and ready so that we can open polls at 7 a.m. on election day. So that is all done the day before.
Okay.
And that is, we're given access. We hold our elections in our local middle school that had been housed at a community center before that. Before that, it was in the high school gym. Before that, it was in the old community ed building. So we've evolved and moved spaces to accommodate the public to be able to have a smooth flow and enough space to actually give people the legal standings that they're supposed to have. You're supposed to be 10 feet away from a voted ballot.
Gotcha.
So really, when I'm addressing you as a voter, you're supposed to be over there. And to do that, you have to be able to provide large spaces. Not every CVT is able to do that for every precinct or every polling location. We are quite fortunate. And that's one of the things about having long-standing members in those positions is that consistency and that focus on developing the right program. It's kind of just like anything else, and people fail to see that administrative portion of it because it's really, you would never ask that question as a voter, like, how did you come up with this setup? It's long, tried and true. We've learned every year, and we've changed and planned every year. And Christy in the deputy clerk position has really focused on making it the absolute best, and I've been fortunate to be her right hand man, and under our current clerk that's been there for 26 years.
Yeah.
So we've done a good job.
Now,
and
do you guys do anything with like registering people to vote?
Christy does all of that. So that all happens within the clerk's office.
Okay.
So you come in or the Secretary of State. So if you move to our community, you go to the Secretary of State to change your tags and whatnot. That will automatically connect to the qualified voter file, which is the Michigan, our state's voter file. You can look up, I can look up anybody that's registered in the state.
Now, I think this is off topic. We didn't talk about this before, but I think there's some controversy with ours recently. I think Jocelyn Benson hasn't handed it over or something. I don't know. It's something weird. They subpoenaed her, and I don't know. There's some craziness going on with that, with some voter records.
So I know that the information that we go on, we do our due diligence to make sure is the information that is handed to us with the voter's ID. So anything that we produce from the qualified voter file to begin our day at elections is downloaded from the qualified voter file. It is heavily administered, and there is a lot of security measures to be able to access that, to be able to work within that, and to be able to produce records from that. We use that for the absent voter ballots. So there's a lot of, and you have to do the trainings to be able to use that program. And there's the securities and all the, little apps that you have to use and the codes. But the AV ballots, we can get back to that, your question about how it goes all together. If we were to work back from election day, would probably be the easiest to talk about it.
Okay.
So with your election inspectors are there the day of, and we have all of the votes there. We have your voters or your polls are open at 7 a.m. and we close at 8 p.m. What we do for our election inspectors is we provide a breakfast and a dinner. We provide them all of the amenities to have them as comfortable as they can for this very long day. We have them there at 6 a.m. and some elections you are closing polls near midnight. And I remember 99, 2001, 2002, 2004. Those were 2, 3, 4 a.m. nights because the equipment has changed. So there's so many things that we can talk about, because just even how we've now been able to administer in such a smooth process is really allotted to the machines that we're using now, the advances in technology that have allowed that process to be so quick and to give that consumable information as soon as possible.
Yeah.
We're actually able to upload that right directly to the county as soon as we know that every single ballot has been ran.
Got it. So going back to the poll workers, are they the same for like every election? And okay, just answer that question first.
In our community, we're really fortunate to have been able to foster an environment that has allowed our election inspectors to choose to come back election after election. We pay them well.
I was about to ask, like, are they paid?
We feed them well. We make sure they have the best chairs. We make sure that if it's hot, we have the big fans. We make sure if it's cold, we've got the heaters. But we've got people bringing in donuts. The voters here are fantastic. But we make sure that we treat them like kings, because they are dealing with the public. And while you do have the people that are appreciative of what you're doing that day, you have the people that are not and are
That
spiteful
think everything
sometimes.
is rigged and you're trying to change votes.
These are people that are really taking part in a process that is one of the fundamental things that makes us Americans. Their choice to be there that day to administer an election and to protect your vote and to provide you the very basis of your American rights is something that should be respected.
Yeah.
And so when you're entering a polling location, we understand, and some elections it's tumbleweeds large parts of the day. Some elections,
Like
it is a
primary
line
elections.
all day long, 13 hours.
I want to make it trendy for people to go vote in primary elections.
Oh, you have to.
People are sleeping on primary
That is
elections.
what they are sleeping on, primary elections. Absolutely.
Like-
that is when you that's how you choose the people that you go to the general.
Exactly.
Like that is the first step. It shouldn't be like, this is the election. No, this is the election process.
Yeah.
It is all encompassing. And it starts actually with the February when you're talking about the presidential primaries.
Yep.
So really, if you have the rights and you have responsibilities as a voter. And it is your responsibility, I believe, as an American to vote. And if you are going to vote, if you're not going to vote in the presidential, at least vote for your election or your local elections.
Yeah, because local is like your roads, your police, fire, water, utilities, like everything that impacts your daily life.
Your schools, your bonds, your
Yes.
taxes, your millages, your proposals, your parks, your libraries, the
Yeah.
people that sit on those boards and drive those budgets, drive those projects, the people that they hire to administer these dollars and to provide those services.
The people that hire our election workers.
The people that hire your election workers. And for a long time, we even developed our own training program because we found our county's training program to be lacking. Since then, luckily, our county has hired great people that are really thriving in those positions and have been able to be there for some time and really own that and make changes there. That has allowed us to rely upon them for our training. But we also provide a level of administration amongst the deputy clerk and me as the chief election inspector to handle any of those, little fires everywhere. When we only have 4 precincts. I mean, you have, CVTs, Detroit has how many precincts?
Oh, I don't know.
Dozens. It's absolutely, you go down there to the Board of Canvassers, Southfield some other CVTs are taking up entire acres of documents because when they're having to recount an election because they had some kind of glitch in their end of day, which that's a part of that. That's actually the tail end. There's not only is there the oversight within the clerk's office, there is oversight the day of with your election inspectors. Then there's the oversight of your county, and then there's the oversight of your Board of Canvassers.
Okay.
And then it goes up to the state.
Wow.
So there is a lot of there's a lot of oversight in play that people really don't think about, and you have the ownership of it. And that's what I like to speak to when we're discussing the conspiracy theory of it. Like, can I trust that that I can trust you with my vote? Because really that's the question that they're saying when they're not wanting to take their shirt, turn their shirt inside out or take their cap off, because we can't allow you to have election material or campaign material inside the polling location. That's also part of our election law. So it's considered propaganda. It's a propaganda act.
Wow.
And I have had to do that at every election. And in every election, there's, a very disgruntled voter that has a lot to say.
So our last election, I don't know if you saw this person, I'm sure you did, but since you can't wear like the propaganda, can't have words or whatever, someone walked in. This was around the time that Trump was, he got his own garbage truck. And he was like poking fun, like MAGA isn't trash and all this stuff. So this lady went to the polls in trash bags.
I did see her. Yes, I did.
So that was a way to sneak around that rule.
I did. Yeah, well, and I there's a tough customer no matter what. When you're dealing in local government, when you're dealing in county, state, federal, there's always a tough customer. A lot of the times you just have to laugh, because really it's your own frustration. We're on the same team here. Like, we want to protect your vote. We want you to come in here and do your duty, rights and responsibilities. You have the right to freely exercise your right to vote. And it's like really what I want people to know, at least for my CVT, and I would imagine for anybody that's administrating elections, that hopefully feels that way, that owns it as deeply as we do, that we are all there for the same goal. We want you to be able to exercise your right, but we want you to be able to do it just as well as that guy or that woman or any other voter in your CVT and in our state and in our country. So when we think about it that way and try to remove the ego of the insistence of the propaganda, because really, at what point, are you going to forcibly remove a voter because they refuse to take their propaganda off? No, but I am going to have a mom talk with you and let you know that this is, you're being rude to me, but we're on the same team.
Yeah.
And I am just trying to uphold the Michigan election law that you're telling me I need to observe. So when you say that to me, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I try to take that approach with it, because really we're all here for the same goal. Keep on moving, but know that that's not cool. And please don't do it again next time.
Yeah. So let's go back. Okay. Registering to vote. You said they have to show ID to register to vote?
They do. They have to show ID and 2 pieces of mail. So something to tie that ID and that information to your residence, to your residency here. So nothing with a P.O. box, because you can't sleep in a P.O. box. But as long as you can tie that, and usually people are coming in with their birth certificates and all of the things that, you have people pull out social security cards and all of that. And it's like just the 2 pieces of mail, bank statements, consumers bills, things like that, energy statements, water bills.
You have to have an ID though.
You have to have an ID. Absolutely.
And state issued?
State issue.
Okay.
Yes.
And so do you guys ever come across like red flags? Like, how do you verify that? Do you verify anything else other than that?
That is our way of doing it. What we use the qualified voter file. Okay. So we are the first step, and that's another thing within that software, is they've really made great strides to be able to connect us with information to keep track of people as well. And so you have your voter history. I can see where you've moved, where you've been to, you go, you come back, everybody, you hop in apartments. So we immediately go in and search to try to find you. And that way we can just pull you right through. Gotcha. And usually you've already done that with the Secretary of State, which we know requires even more for you to obtain that ID. So you're already having to really show that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these that I've read, and I've not exhausted the document, so I'm by no means an expert. But a lot of what is in that executive order, we are already observing here in Michigan.
Yeah.
And there is, when you come in and you sign or fill out the voter application, that also has an affidavit on the back. So say I left work and I left my purse and I have to go vote on lunch, and I get all the way there and I forgot that I don't have my ID. Mm-hmm. You sign the back of that application to vote. It's an affidavit stating that you are who you are. It's a legal document. And then you bring that to the election inspector right there at the first table. The way we do it, you do your application first, then you enter the polling location so the lines aren't bogged up with people trying to write out. So we've done a good job at separating that space out. It allows for smooth transition, especially people that come in large groups. Whole families come to vote at a time. Mm-hmm. So you can sign that affidavit, and then as long as we can pull you up in our list, and if we can't, then you come over to the deputy clerk and she looks you up in the qualified voter file, and we see that you're there and we see that you've signed the affidavit. And if you're not on our CVT's registration, then you have to take your ID and 2 pieces of mail to the clerk, mm-hmm. get registered there. Then she's going to give you a receipt of your registration. You bring it back to the polling location, and then we have them manually add you to that list. That is all a part of what we do.
Now, I will say, through the state, I feel like it's easier. So people always are shocked by this. Someone actually called me a liar about this, which I think is hilarious. But my mother is not a citizen. She's a permanent resident. Every time she interacts with the state, they try to get her to register to vote. And if you go to Secretary of State, they already have the checkbox or whatever to register, and she has to physically tell them uncheck it. So I actually told my senator that, and she was like, "What?" I was like, "Yes, that's a thing." She's like, "They keep telling us that there's no." Some people think she's illegal. She's not illegal, okay? She's a permanent resident. But she's like, we're being told that only citizens are being registered. I'm like, I don't know if it's that easy. Then I feel like some non-citizens could register. But would clerks, I'm assuming local clerks would probably catch that. I don't know. That's kind of a loaded topic. But
yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of moving parts there.
Yeah.
And those are usually specific to those instances. I don't believe that you have... I would be curious, and I'm sure that you could quantify it somehow, to how many times that's actually happening.
Yeah, and if it does happen, then they could prosecute her because she's not supposed to be registering.
Right. But I mean, we've talked about that. It's a thing we joke about, is the election police. And it's really us. It's the voter. You know what I mean? It really is. It's like you and it's me, and then making sure that there's accountability and integrity within these systems, and that the right people are doing the right job, and that they're also employing people that are doing the right job or know how to do that right job.
Well, I love that because it just brings us back to why local government is so important and why we need to be involved in local government.
It is, absolutely. Because remember, anybody can run for a position. It doesn't mean that they're qualified to do the administrative part of what that requires. And that's different for every CVT. Not all boards are administrative. It happens for township law, and for us, we have to have administrative positions that are elected. Mm-hmm. So it's important, even more so for our community, that people are paying attention to who's running for their local offices and what's in their toolbox.
Because we elect treasurer and clerk and stuff. So these are very skilled jobs that we elect. Yes. So really someone with no knowledge, our treasurer has to worry about property tax and all of the auditing and everything. Yes. So realistically, someone who has no experience in numbers, government, anything could be elected to that position.
Absolutely. And so so then what would happen? What's the fallout there? What would
No
you
idea.
expect though? So at one point, what I believe 2020, because we were doing Zoom meetings. 2020 election cycle, there was every position had an opponent. So every trustee, there was, at worst case scenario, I could have had 5 new bosses
Wow.
that had never worked in the office, that I had never worked with. You have no idea what their skill set is or what they're going to bring to the table. But you know what it takes to day to run this business. I refer to it to a business as a business because
It is.
for our community, you run it like a business. And really,
Exactly.
if you look up the chain, you run it like a business.
Like you have a budget, you can't
You
go over budget.
Right.
Like
Yes.
it
Yeah.
really is.
You
a
have your
business.
investors, you have your product,
Yep.
and you have your board, you have your CEOs, you have your committees, you have all of these things that are all moving and working together at the same time. So it could have been where your 2 administrative positions, appointed employees. So there's only 6 of us in our office. 3 of us are hired. 3
Which
of
is
us are
incredible.
elected. And you would have had your administrators training your elected officials.
Yeah.
Which is
exactly.
luckily for me did not happen.
Yeah.
That did not happen. And our treasurer now, we first turnover since 2008.
But what you just described is exactly how the bureaucracy takes over. Because technically, you're a bureaucrat. So
Well, I mean, and that's only because I was raised in it. My community raised me. I took a position just out of happenstance.
yeah,
And
I know it
walked
has like
into
a
it a
negative.
whole life in government.
Yeah.
That is allowed me to work and thrive in my own community and try to make what I know to be important, elections, and I just wrote a grant for a senior chore program. So we have,
awesome.
Yard maintenance and snow removal for our seniors, for hopefully this grant cycle at least. That could change with the funding. So now I am in the office working to try to find funding for when that grant runs out, so just replace it.
Yeah. No, and I don't say that. I know bureaucracy and bureaucrat has like a negative connotation, but like you're an example of how it's not always negative. But what I was getting at is like if there was a bad bureaucrat and you have all new staff, like all new heads in your government office, then that's where the bureaucrats have to train the new people, and that's where they could take over. They can be like, actually, I want it this way. Oh yeah, that money just disappears. Don't worry about that. Like,
It's just how it's always been done.
yeah, exactly.
Well, fortunately that hasn't happened and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And we were able to hold on to some consistency. You do see a lot of that turnover, at least in our county right now, because I think that a lot of the elected officials all were coming in around the same time. And they've done a good job, enough to be re-elected time and time again. I mean, you have supervisors that are, 40 years in their position.
Wow.
Just one of our neighboring townships, he just retired, 40 plus years.
Wow.
And that our clerk, 26 years. So
and can you imagine if he like wasn't reelected? Like, like
that
you're
rocks
out
the
of job.
boat. And so you hope that there can be planned transitions. And then what does that look like? Where are those investments? Because now we have to remember all the things that you take on as a decades long employee. Essentially, you're an elected official, but you are also an administrative employee. So what things have you taken on? What are your pet projects? What are your things that only you do that nobody really knows about? But if you're not doing it, if you're not there and you're not doing it, it's really going to have some effect, like with the West Nile grant out of our county. If that wasn't there and people weren't getting their bug repellent, you'd see it on social media.
Yeah. Where'd it go? Okay, so where were we
Circle
at?
back.
Voter registration. Anything else you want to speak to on voter registration?
So voter registration is not really, I don't think that you're going to see much effect on Michigan voting registration. I think that we already have an established system here in the state of Michigan that has been supported by the Secretary of State from back to Ruth Johnson. Probably most notably, Ruth Johnson, now Senator Johnson, or former, is she still in? Yes?
In our state?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know.
I was going to say, let's see.
I don't know.
In the state of Michigan, we have a long-standing investment in our elections, and we've had some great people in those spots. Even with Jocelyn Benson, the influence of 2020 and her decision to send out the mass AV voter ballot applications, that had a direct impact immediately on our pre-election labor. So absentee ballots are available for any election 45 days prior to election day.
That's a lot.
45 days.
And
So
I will say, for me running for office, that was really difficult because that cut so much time from me because I turned in the signatures to run for office in July. I think July 22nd or something was the last day. And I made a last minute decision, of course. That's my life. And then what was it, like a month later, like voting already started. And like it takes a lot of time to go door to door.
oh yeah.
I mean, I could probably hit 20 doors.
The campaigns are long, yes.
And then I started handwriting letters to people, which was so successful. And if I just started that earlier, I probably would have won because I still get people to this day thanking me for sending them a letter.
Right.
So that was such like a personal touch, but it took hours to do, if
Labor
you can
intensive.
imagine. So that just cuts off so much time for people to be able to run. So just from that point of view, but from an administrative point of view, what do you think about the 45 days starting early?
Oh, you need it. And
Okay.
actually, it starts even before then.
Okay.
For us, we want to start that 45-day already ready. So you're talking about by this time, you've already interacted with the people that are running. You've already worked with the county and certified the ballots, ordered your ballots. You've stuffed your ballots because we make sure that we have the ballot in the secrecy sleeve in the envelope. All of those envelopes have to be numbered to coincide with the ballot. And you have to arrange all of that. And we're operating in a historical building that's, needs a little bit of rearranging and I'll tell you why. So in 2020, we are now having a mass of AV ballot applications are permanent or not permanent. What's the proper term?
And what AV?
So AV is absent voter.
Absent voter.
Those are the absent voter ballots, the mail-in ballots,
Okay.
is commonly called. Those ballots we start to issue from the applications that we receive that 45 days prior. So when 2020 occurred, we had 927 people on that permanent AV list. Mm-hmm. And so at that time, you had to be like over 60. There was that was the over 60 or a request for a permanent ballot because you were, like a snowbird. I'm going to be in Florida until May, but I want to vote a Michigan election. I want to vote my local election. I want to vote where my homestead is, right? Where are my tax dollars going? That's where I want to vote. So those people get their ballots and those are sent out, and we make sure that we have those issued and ready to go out when that 45-day hits. So we have already stuffed and issued ballots, and they're going into the mail that day to give people every possible minute that they have with their ballot.
Yeah,
And even then, we
Junior.
still have a large amount because our mailing system in this area is not as good as it could be, I think.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of bureaucracy within the United States postal system, and we need to put some real eyes there to make that function even better when it comes, especially when you have an influx of absent voter ballots from every CVT in the state at the same time. Those systems need their own strategic planning for those times, and I think if there was some kind of grant system that went into that for extra employees within the postal system, that would really help move those AV ballots and get them to the voter and back to the CVT, where the time of arrival wouldn't be an issue. And that's one of the things with Trump's executive order that they talk about as well, is that when he's calling for ballots that are either postmarked or arrived postmarked beforehand or the day of the election would not be voted unless they were received by election day. Michigan operates that way.
If states must stop counting ballots received after election day in line with federal law.
And so that's Michigan operates that way now.
Okay.
So the impact on that part of the order would not.
I feel like it's
the
probably
Michigan
like
voter
a
is not going to
California-
feel that.
I feel like that's probably a California really rule. But I was gonna say RFK Jr. He tried to get his name off the ballot in Michigan, but he couldn't because it was past that 45 days. So mail-in ballots were already printed.
They were right, or we can't. No, that's not a thing. if you check out or still there, and you know what's unfortunate about that is because that's how those laws overlap, and what that causes is that if he had to have statutorily bowed out by a certain date because of the influence on ballot printing and getting those ballots out to the voter, because those votes that went to him could have went to someone that actually, or have been enough to sway a local county, state.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess add it up, quantify it over the country, and it could probably sway a federal, senators, things like Congress. So, that's the trickiness with AV ballots. But in 2020, we started out, we'd have 927 ready that 45 day, send them out. That immediately went to 2,400.
Wow.
So that tripled our workload pre-election day.
Yeah.
And that tripled our space needs within this historic building that we're working in with this limited space. And now you have cubic footage that you have to provide. Another great thing that our deputy clerk is, she's so organized, and she is so on top of her game that it is always a very streamlined process, even in the office. So even if you never go to the polls and you are only an absent voter ballot voter, you are still having a great, consistent experience. You're still seeing the same faces election after election, and it's still the same process. Most people come right in. They know where to stand. They know that they need their ID. They watch us do the thing. We most likely, you already know them, which is another reason when we're talking about verification and as people age, aging into like an adult care facility. You can, in the state of Michigan, have people assist you in your voting.
Okay.
The ADA has actually provided us with a grant that provided, I believe, all of the states with the ADA voter equipment compliance for blind, deaf. It's got the Braille on it. That is always set up and available in the polls, any election, and in our offices for the AV portion as well. Yeah. And at those early voting locations.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't even talk about early voting.
I know,
too.
yeah.
Man, there's so much here. We
much.
talked about voter registration. We talked a little bit about early or absentee voting. So how does the process look like in the office? So you guys mail it out. someone,
We send them out.
you know,
So they get their ballot. All of the postage is paid. So all they have to do is they open up the outside, it's the outside envelope. They pull out the outside envelope that holds their ballot that's already in the secrecy sleeve. So that person takes their ballot. They now have until 8 p.m. on election day to return that ballot.
Okay.
So say I get my ballot, I still have 40 days left. And I'm, watching what's going on, and I'm really monitoring. I'm talking to people. I'm deciding about who I'm going to vote for, what proposals I'm going to go for, what millages are on there. So you can get the full compass, the responsibility of the voter, right? If I decide I can put it in the mail, I've decided I trust the timing of the Postal Service, I'm going to send this back to the office. Great. We're going to get that. John brings us this giant stack every day. We then check those into the qualified voter file.
Okay.
That's got its own programming for this election that ties to the lists that are printed out for election day that are in the computers, so that when I scan your ID at the election, I know if you've been assigned an absentee voter ballot.
Okay.
So now each voter only gets one ballot. That's for anybody all over the U.S. So you now have to produce this ballot.
Okay. So no one can double vote.
Nobody can double vote.
Okay.
That's where the qualified voter file, the administrating within the within the clerk's offices, the timely production and downloading of that information to take to the polls, how that interacts over pre-election and election day. There's some well-established practices that do not allow for that, especially now that things are electronic. It's even easier, and because of the investment in the qualified voter filing, the advances of that technology, we know if you have a ballot. Gotcha. Very, very seldom is there going to be a glitch in that system anymore.
So can they mail it the day of voting, or do you guys have to receive it by voting day?
We have to receive it by 8 p.m. So the clerk's office has to receive it to then process it through the qualified voter file, because you have to receive it within that software.
Gotcha.
I think.
Have you guys received votes
Overlord.
after?
Oh yeah, you get the mailed voters, and we hang on to them. That's the state wants to know about those numbers. There's somebody in there adding those up, but we don't run them.
Yeah.
So if you want your vote counted in the state of Michigan, it has to be to the clerk's office by 8 p.m. at the close of polls.
That's good to know.
Then your clerk is going to process it through the qualified voter file and then deliver it to the polling location. Then those election inspectors that have been educated and certified by your county are going to process those. And even that has its own process.
Okay, so
to ensure the secrecy of your ballot.
Okay, so when you guys get in the mail or someone comes in and hands you their absentee voter ballot, all you guys do in the office is check that they've turned it in. And
I scan it, but with the qualified voter file, I then have to match their signatures.
Okay.
So I have to certify that this is this same signature.
Gotcha.
And that's where the aging population, that's where that you can see, where is this person in their journey? You have people that have not signed a new document for the Secretary of State for some time, or you have people that have had massive life changes since the last election that maybe don't allow them the dexterity to write any longer. There is that portion where, did I assist this voter? And there is a clause for that within our election. And but they have to make their mark.
Gotcha.
So, but we do also go out of our way as our small CVT we can facilitate that and, deduce that as long as we have that face to face.
Gotcha.
So,
but you don't start counting ballots or anything.
no, we do not start counting ballots. The only early ballots that go into a ballot reader are at those early voting locations.
Okay.
No ballot, no AV ballot is opened or processed prior to the open of polls on election day.
Okay, so let's talk about the early voting then. So how much early voting do we have?
That's 9 days.
Too much. No, I'm just kidding.
So for our small town, I don't think that you're going to see the benefits until it's an established process.
Yeah.
For CVTs like Detroit, Lansing, Grand Rapids, Traverse City, even like a Southfield or whatnot, I think that you definitely see some benefit because of that influx into those polling locations.
Yeah.
Like I alluded to earlier, we're fortunate enough to have the space and the setup and the time invested to know how to move our population for our CVT.
Yeah.
And we know the pitfalls, and because we've had the fortune of having the same inspectors for some time, we know almost immediately what isn't working so we can tweak it as it's going. And
in my perfect world, we would have Friday, Saturday, Sunday voting. Friday, a national holiday. Everyone's out of work, other than you, of course. Mm-hmm. So then, I don't know.
The Saturday prior to the election, we're always open. Mm-hmm. And that was always, and you're always able to get that AV ballot. Even on the Monday, the day before, you can walk in and vote an AV ballot in the office. Mm. You can't take it with you, but you can sit and vote it right there. Okay. And we provide ample space for as many as we need. I mean, in 2020, we still had that practice. And in our small office, we were still trying to social distance and the hanging plastic and the masks. And it was difficult.
I actually voted in the office on accident because I just moved here. Oh. So I didn't know anything.
I think I remember that.
I had no idea. And there was a lot of people in there. So I think a lot of people thought that was the voting location.
That is the largest number that was the most people that had ever attended a Saturday prior to an election day opening ever. And in the 26 years I've been doing elections, that was the most that ever came in the Saturday before. I will have entire Saturdays. Like I bet you tomorrow I won't have a single person there for those 30 voters we have in the adjacent county.
Crazy. Okay, so talked all about absentee ballot.
So the absentee ballots, how they're processed at the polls. Mm-hmm. We have 4 precincts because our permanent AV list has changed and how that grows has changed, and that a massive growth in 2020. We now create that precinct for AV ballots. It's its own precinct.
Oh, okay.
So the mass of AV ballots that we take in prior to election day, right up until the night before, and they're actually transported to the county where they host our precinct and they host our election inspectors that we've hired, that we have mutually educated and certified. They run all of the AV ballots as its own precinct at the county, and then they host our election inspectors, and all the ballots that we receive the Monday night that come in the mail on Tuesday, that arrive on Tuesday up until that 8 p.m., the election day, 8 p.m., those are all counted at the polls.
Okay.
So precinct 5, or, our AV precinct counted separately, its own equipment at the county, overseen by the county elections, which we are happy and so fortunate to have some really great long-standing people there that really know their stuff. And it's really it's great. We're fortunate. The ballots that arrive to the polling location the night or throughout the day are counted and processed by those election inspectors.
Now, I've never actually had a mail-in ballot before, so when you guys open up the envelope, you said there's a secrecy sleeve, so you don't actually see what they voted?
So there is a secrecy sleeve that once you fold that ballot back up, you slip it into the sleeve. We anticipate, behavioral science. We anticipate that when you open your ballot, you're probably going to put it back together the way that you received it, right? That's why we put it in the sleeve, and then we take that and we kind of cup it into the envelope, and then we put that in the outside envelope. It also allows with the one sticker for each envelope, with the outside envelope with the window. There's a science to it.
A whole thing.
Yeah, there's a whole thing. There's some guy in a room thinking this up. He was probably hired by somebody that was elected. So what we do is we have a whole row of the election inspectors for that precinct that have to swear the same oath that the president swears to. It's the same oath all the way down. Local government on up. We're all doing it. We're all swearing to uphold the Constitution.
Wow.
Every single one of us. So that is how we start our morning. It's bagels and oaths to start the day.
Well, I love that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So when we go back to the integrity of the election inspector, the integrity of the election on election day, and when people have that conspiracy theory to it, at least for my CVT, I want to remind people that these are people from the community that are upholding your American rights.
Yeah.
And they're protecting their own. A lot of these, they're even from neighboring communities. They used the AV ballot system to be able to vote in the election that is in their community, to be able to work in your community, to uphold your rights.
Yeah.
So try to, tread lightly, be kind, and remember that everybody has to stand in line.
Exactly. So tell me, I forgot to ask, like when you hire election workers, do they have to have a background check or anything?
So that has changed as time goes on, and that is a Christy question. I don't know how deep of a dive as far as a background check she goes, but I know that there is a process for that. So again, we have been so fortunate that we work within a lot of the same people that have been there since 06. 08.
Yeah.
I have election inspectors that have been doing these things for 20 years. And they've seen all the different equipment, all the different locations, all the different residents, all the different elections. I mean, each election has its own turmoil because of what's going on. When you have a hot local election coupled with a hot presidential and like some weird proposal, people are hyped. Mm-hmm. The voter is the need to impact those votes is palpable, and it can spill over into how we treat people. For our CVT, I am doing and striving our absolute best to give you a consistent product that I know is upholding your rights as an American, that I know I'm upholding the Constitution, and I'll swear to it every time. Because it's really one of the best things you can do. I mean, you want to feel like an American, go be an election inspector.
I was about to say, like, you might as well, like, if you really feel like our elections are rigged and all this stuff, then
and you can join that with your own respective party. If you want to volunteer on your chosen party's website, you can do that. If you want to go to the michigan.gov website and put your information in there, you can. If you want to go to your county, if you want to go to your CVT's website, you should be able to do it there, or you call your clerk's office. How do I become an election inspector? And they'll probably send you out some information. Have you ever worked an election before? And then you have to choose a party in Michigan.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So each one of our election inspectors has to declare a party, because we have to have an even representation of both sides. So, and if you say,
well, then I'm out. I'm independent.
But that's where it makes it hard. Yeah, absolutely. Because that does make it difficult. And so you have to have, you'll have the people, whatever you need me to be.
So does it have to be Democrat or Republican? What about Libertarian? Any third party?
It's the top two.
Okay. Wow, that's so interesting. I had no idea.
Right. And you know what? I might be incorrect. So if you look more into that election law, it might be like somebody can declare the Green Party. We've only dealt with the two.
Yeah.
expanded my mind.
This is great though. But this is why I have you on. Like I said, like most people, even myself, like you walk in and vote, and then like what else happens? I don't know. I had no idea any of this. So
Yeah.
this is great. Okay, so we talked about. I know we talked a lot about absentee, but it's just a big thing.
It is a big thing. So, and I want to get back to that to explain just the 2 seconds.
Yeah.
At the polls, we have now a stack of ballots that has its own list that shows that it has been received the day it was issued.
Okay.
The day it was received, its ballot number, who it's attached to, the NDC, that's attached to that, the scan code that's attached to that, and the precinct, all of the good stuff is on that list. So we can make sure that we have received every ballot that's on this list. And if there's one that's missing, where is it, or was that a mistake?
Gotcha.
So, like a human error. That's why we have so many eyes on it. That's why it goes to the clerk's office, comes to the deputy clerk or myself, and then we give it to the election inspectors for that precinct.
How does it get from the clerk's office to?
The clerk brings that from the clerk's office to the polls.
Is it
sometimes
like
for
secretive or
CVTs?
anything?
Yes, so it's like in a bag, and she has to bring it to the polls and whatnot, and then she gives it to us, and then we give it to the election inspectors. Some CVTs may have the police force to do that.
Okay.
We do have the opportunity to partner with our local village police, and they have started to escort that down to the county for us. That was something that we had always done until
I forgot, because this is the county too. See,
Yeah.
is it confusing that the county votes or counts some votes and we count votes?
No, because
Okay.
it's all uploaded the same way, and because we have a great working relationship with our county elections and the people that sit in those seats, it's an easy yes to allow them to host and to oversee all of the administration that comes with that, because they would have to be sequestered with those ballots to be able to process those ballots and uphold the secrecy of those ballots. And that's where that process of how you process an absentee voter ballot is important in protecting the secrecy of that ballot.
And you said that's for any absentee that's 3 days before the election that you received. What was it? What are the ones that you count at your location?
The ones that we receive the night before, so there has to be a cutoff point for the list that you upload from QVF into the computers that you're going to be using, that poll book. So that has to be uploaded at some point so it's ready for the next day. So that usually happens in like the 8 p.m., but your postal service closes at 5. So she is going over by 5 to get whatever they have at the post office.
Okay.
So we can add that to the list to make sure that's uploaded so that information is available at the polls the next day. Then any that the post office receives that night of and that arrives to us in the morning is inputted within the QVF. So that is taken periodically and given to the polls. And then
Ours, but not the county. Okay.
Not the county. The county is a fixed number that they received via transport of county sheriff from our office to Oakland County elections.
Gotcha.
So that is, under lock and key at all times.
Gotcha.
And even when they're in the clerk's office, they're under lock and key.
Good.
So there's you're the steward of this,
Yeah.
right? And if I believe that if everybody really operated that this is the fundamental thing that makes us an American, and it's your duty to protect it with like the utmost care,
Yeah.
that every CVT would be just as successful as we are at that.
And then, sorry, we're kind of jumping around
That's
a little
all
bit, but okay, so the absentee that you count at your location
Has been arrived at the clerk's office that day.
and you said they're supposed to, put it all back where they have like the secrecy sleeve. I'm assuming some people don't put it back properly.
Right. So there's always the guy. I shouldn't say the guy. There's always the voter that will not use the secrecy sleeve. They folded it their own way. They made little notes. They're talking to you in your office. Please, next time.
My gosh.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I want to see more representation on these ballots. There's always
that is
little
hilarious.
letters, But that's why we set it up the way we do. So we have a whole team for each precinct. We always have the two in the front that are receiving your application to vote and issuing your ballot. We have a 2-man team at least, sometimes 3, depending on how big the election is. And then we've got a 2-man team, possibly 3 at the back that take your ballot and your application, take that top tab off so that you can run it through the machine, and then make sure that your application is received and put on the spindle in order, and that you get your voter's sticker, and then you process it through your ballot, never leaving the secrecy sleeve.
Yeah.
So I can still take off that tab. They even designed the secrecy sleeves to make sure that this could happen, that I could push up the ballot in that secrecy sleeve without ever having to open it. So I can touch it and move it up and down on this side without ever having to open it.
Yeah.
So I can get that top tab off. That is where the ballot number that you have been issued as a voter is removed from your ballot, that now that it is leaving you, it's secret.
Gotcha.
We do that with AV ballots I have one person that is opening the envelope and taking the ballot and the secrecy sleeve out and making a pile of them.
Okay.
So I'm bringing them all in. And when you have a ton that come in, like a large election, we have them do them in sets of 10. Easy, small chunks that we know that we're able to do so nothing gets jumbled. It's all about being, calm and collected and doing it in a smooth process in a clean environment, that we've all been doing this for a while. And then Christy and I are able to buzz around and make sure that everybody's got whatever you want. You remember the process. Here we go. Remember, guys, we're going to set you up.
And is that throughout the day that you guys are doing that? Or
no, that's
after?
at the end. We don't do that. There's it for an election that nobody comes to, like a special school election. Yes, you can, because I can actually take a couple inspectors. I can take 3 inspectors and have them come over here and do that real quick, and then put them in the secrecy sleeves and then go and process them.
Okay.
But nobody's around. I don't have voters around. I don't have anybody, kind of possibly being able to tie this and that and follow it down. And that's why they're done in batches as well, because that anonymity starts to slip away as we remove the ballot from the envelope, right? So I have opened the envelope and removed the ballot. It's now this information is over here. The ballot with the number is over here. So now the only person that now knows that this person has this ballot is this election inspector. Now, if it's in a secrecy sleeve, perfect. I've never seen any vote. If, a voter has not done that, then we have secrecy sleeves available. They will immediately put it into a secrecy sleeve. What are the odds of seeing a vote? There's a probability there.
Yeah.
Is that going to influence anything? No, because we're going to remove this now again. So now this next person takes those ballots out of the secrecy sleeve, removes, or it puts it or remove out of the inputs.
The tab. Takes the tab
Takes
off.
it out of the envelope secrecy sleeve, puts it into a foldable secrecy sleeve, then takes the tab off.
Okay.
That way we're trying to, because imagine I can do this motion without ever really looking at your ballot. So again, now what is the odds that somebody saw your vote? It's going to be that person now that just took it from the secrecy sleeve envelope and put it in a secrecy sleeve folder.
Gotcha.
Okay, it's different from and now we don't know who that person is, because only this person would know who that ballot is to know what that vote is.
Okay.
Now this is now given, after we take the tab off, to the person that goes and puts it into the machine.
And do they put it in the machine like how I would on voting day, where I just
You hold your secrecy sleeve and slide it in? Yes.
Okay.
Because the the top goal of that entire process is the secrecy of the vote.
Okay.
So we do absolutely everything that we can to make sure that nobody is really laying eyes on that ballot.
And you're saying like I can just go and observe all this? Wow.
Absolutely. So the first 2016, so the first, or 15 at the time. So that first Trump cycle, we had equipment. It was like a meat reader, like the standardized testing. It was that type of box that you slid it into a ballot box that had an electric diverter to where it was like, if you voted a certain way, it would swing back and forth.
Interesting.
So like if it was like 0 votes, or it jammed, it would not separate them the right way. It was write-in versus no write-in, because the equipment before that, we had to sit afterwards and go through every ballot in the ballot box to separate the ones that had write-ins and the ones that didn't. And then you had to take each one of those write-ins and separate them by name.
I didn't even think about
add
write-ins.
those up. And then you had to make sure that write-in was even valid. And that information came from the county. There's been a lot of graduation that has made it a much smoother process.
Yeah.
It used to be very, very cumbersome after the close of polls.
So how do you guys deal with write-ins? We actually had a ton.
So now that's part of this new equipment is the scan. It scans it. Now that is done by the Board of Canvassers, which it was always certified by the Board of Canvassers. They actually have always counted those votes. We did the administrative process and isolated those ballots for them to be able to certify.
Okay.
So the process and the function was always the same. It's just that the technology is now different. Mm-hmm. So they get a specific tape of write-ins that is produced by the equipment in that scanning technology.
Is it just like a screenshot of just the write-in?
It is. Look, it's that whole race.
Okay.
So they get a whole tape that machine produces, but then it's uploaded to the cloud to them, and a whole report is created, so they see it in all different forms. But essentially a tape is created of a inch or 2 inch by 2 inch, just as it shows on your ballot.
Okay.
It's just like a screenshot of it. So they have always done that. They continue to do that. That's fantastic, especially for the labor portion of your election day. Plus, that is a process, or was a process, that you wanted to be able to try to make as smooth for your people as possible. And that's where that carryover piece of your election inspectors and be able to retain them, and when it was that labor intensive, was really important. You needed those people that knew how to execute those tasks within that day to make sure everything was smooth. And I mean, when I came in, there were people, the ladies there had been doing it since the 60s, when they were carrying the books of the registration. Bernice Alexander was the treasurer for 40 years, 36 years. I mean, incredible. And she said, we would just take these books and we would walk them down there and we'd have to look everybody up. And I remember that too, printing off whole lists and having to go through, separating them, making big binders, separating them alphabetically. People have to go, and then they'd highlight your name, give you your ballot, and then they'd have to write it down in the poll book. That's all on computer now.
Yeah. So for me, voting day of, when I go put my ballot in the machine, is it counting my ballot right there and then? Or do you take that ballot from there and do something with it?
So it's counting that ballot right there and then. At the close of polls, that information is then shared with Oakland County.
Okay, so you don't touch the ballot again after that.
We touch the ballot when we remove that ballot and put it into the sealed ballot container.
Okay.
So that box that it slips into, ours sit on a black box. That box that it slips into, we then organize them. I make sure that my inspectors make sure they're as tidy as possible. It's really hard to go into a board of canvassers, open up your ballot box, and it's just in shambles. You never want to have to deal with that. So we always make sure that we take that extra few minutes to organize that the night of. It's like who closed here? So we make sure that we do that, and that makes it a lot easier. We haven't had to go to the Board of Canvassers in a few elections now. So, and that's, I can say, primarily because of the change in election equipment.
Okay.
The
What would
the
you have to go?
M100 was absolutely awful.
So what would you have to go to them for?
Well, what would happen is that, so say I'm now on this old machine and I am a voter that has, tried to forcibly push my ballot through the reader. Now I'm jammed. So it sucks it in and pushes it back out and the number changes. But now I'm holding this ballot. But it says that that it's already read the ballot, but it actually pushed the ballot out.
Oh.
Or vice versa. It sucked it in and nothing happened. Now I got to get in there, get the ballot out, make sure, and then you note that. So there's a space within the poll book that allows you to make remarks. And they encourage you to make any remark, especially, if there was a guy that was, had a propaganda problem, or somebody slipped and fell, or somebody asked a question about this, that, or the other. A challenger arrived, because you can actually sign up to be a challenger as well, which is another form of oversight. You as a voter can go and sit. We always ask to be kind and observe the process, not to take part in the process.
You had some challenging ones because I could just see it.
Well, and it's not only that, is that human nature, it becomes, sometimes those can be cumbersome to the process and to your election inspectors because they feel the need to be hospitable. Okay. And it becomes, sometimes for some people, they just have the insatiable need to talk politics, and the voting space is sacred.
Yeah,
you cannot discuss these things.
Yeah,
we cannot have political discussion and political discourse. If you want to talk about your local government and you have a discussion, if you have a question about the cemetery, if you want to talk to me about signs or how you think this process can go better, by all means. But if you want to talk to me about this guy or this senator or that senator, I cannot do that. I'm not here for that. Yeah. And I can't allow you to do that either. Yeah. So as a challenger, it's natural to start chatting with people and to, be hospitable, but it's another to then become cumbersome or become influential within the process. So that's where Christy and I try to always be, the deputy clerk and I always make sure that we are observant of those members of the process and how they relate with our inspectors, and that our inspectors can let us know when that's happening so that we will address that.
So what do they do?
Well, if you have somebody that comes in as a challenger, they have to register with their party.
Okay.
So they're registering with the GOP or the DNC, right? Mm-hmm. They have credentials. We provide them with credentials as well. They've went through a training. The party knows that they're there. They have the opportunity to stay for as long or as little as they would like.
Okay.
Now, what they can do is observe the process. They cannot take part in it, but they can challenge a voter's right to vote. And it would be up to us to then show them why this voter has the right to vote. So say you had a voter, I have a challenger in precinct 4. And a voter comes in and they've signed the application to vote. They have their ID. They hand it to the election inspector. She swipes the ID. They're not registered in our township. So we would then, for us, because this is how we operate our election day, that election inspector then brings that to us. But if so, in that process, that challenger said, no, well, they're not on the list, they can't vote. Then it would be up to me and the deputy clerk, and some CVTs, I'm sure the election inspector themselves, to then verify and find this voter. I mean, people very rarely show up like, oh, I didn't know you had to register to vote. I've lived in America my whole life and I just don't know the process. But you would be surprised at how many people like, I don't remember, I forget. Like, you were just here. You were just here. I know, I see you every election. What do you mean you forgot? Wow. You know where to go. It's the same every time. So, but again, we're fortunate. And we've really focused on that, delivering a consistent product that allows the voter to have a certain expectation. And we try to meet or exceed that expectation every time. And there's always the little list of things we need to get, things we need to do better, things we need to do differently, earlier, later, just to tweak it to make it that much better, that much easier on ourselves. Really, because by the time election day comes, we've been in election day for months.
Yeah.
It's every day. I'm processing ballots every day. We're issuing every day to make sure that you get it as soon as humanly possible. And we're receiving those ballots so that you can check that app and see that we've received your ballot as soon as humanly possible.
I know that there's an app too.
So
I've never done absentee, so I don't know. There is,
and that's another form of oversight is they can see when it hasn't been received, Gotcha. And they know when they sent it in. My mother-in-law, Prime, she knows exactly when she put it in the mail, and she knows that you should have it by now. And where is it? Do you have it? She starts it off. Do you have my application yet? Like, it's not even available yet. They haven't even been printed yet. You will be the first one.
So the challenger, they just say, I don't think this person can vote, and you guys just see if they can or not. So that's all it is.
Go through the same process we would if there was no challenger there.
Yeah.
So it's just another form of oversight, I believe,
have you ever overturned, have you guys ever, were they ever helpful, I guess? Or did they catch anything ever?
Not anything that we wouldn't have caught already. Yeah, no. And again, I think that goes back to I have experienced election inspectors. Yeah. I'm an experienced election inspector. Our deputy clerk is experienced. Our clerk is experienced. Our county is experienced. We are fortunate. I will say, high five state of Michigan, and the Secretary of State's office has been consistent. I mean, Ruth Johnson did a lot to bolster that system, and Jocelyn Benson has done her due diligence as well. So as someone that's worked in it, it's a consistent product. As far as
you can't really talk politics.
I was going to say I can't talk.
You
politics.
Can't talk politics, but
it's not the same for every CVT. But for my community, I have great experiences with elections. There have been some law hiccups that caused some irregularities in our last cycle, like the library board things, the changes in one sentence. And I learned that on a separate topic with land splits and bureaucracy. And I didn't know that the registrar's office had a lobbying,
oh my God.
office.
So what happened was, for people that don't know, there was this rule that changed, or we just didn't know about it, whatever, that if you're running for a library board, you have to have a primary election, which a lot of local elections, you don't have primaries. I didn't have a primary in mine. So all of these libraries around our county didn't hold primary elections.
It was tied to the number of people that had registered to run for those boards.
Okay.
So if it exceeded the number of people that would run for that board, or it was the number, then that triggered the primary. So it was just something that had never happened in our community
Oh,
before.
because a lot of small towns, no one challenges. Like you have
So
five open seats and you have 5 people running,
or
so,
3 people running in 5 open seats.
yeah,
that
and then
happened
you have to
a lot.
appoint people. Yeah, so basically, no one on our library board was actually on the ballot. Every single person had to run as a write-in.
Yes.
So that was the whole thing. But
then that showed you the ability to show success within that realm too. I mean, if they would have voted for themselves at that point, they would have won. One vote would have won that office because of that happenstance. But you can have success in local elections with a write-in campaign, depending on the office, depending on the topic, depending on the CVT. But you can. That's another form. Within the election law.
Maybe our senator just told me, I was talking about the Detroit mayor, Mike Duggan, running for governor, and she said he won his first campaign as a write-in, and there was another Mike Duggan on the ballot. So, because I was like, why is he running as an independent? He's not an independent. He's definitely a Democrat. And she was like, I really think he thinks that he's going to win. And this is why, because he won as a write-in, even when someone else was on the ballot. So people going in had to know, no, not that Mike Duggan. You have to write in a different Mike Duggan. That's crazy.
And that campaign had to have been so intensive at those polling locations, because those little propaganda pieces, the nail files and the handbills and things like that, that pith, which is a business, put it in their hand, that ability to put their name in their hand as they're walking in to vote their ballot, because we know that the retention for that, unless they're a person that has researched this candidate, knows that they have to go in. I mean, you have voters that will come in and get a sample ballot, which is also something that's available. Okay. I always suggest that you can get a sample of your ballot, and it's on the state website, it's on the apps. You can get and review what's going to be on your ballot ahead of time electronically, or you can actually get the physical sample ballot. Okay. And you have those people who will go home, fill it out, and bring it to the polls to be able to transpose those votes and do that, so that they had all the time to figure out exactly who you are.
Yeah, that's what I do. I always pull up the sample ballot. I didn't know you could get a paper one, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always pull up the sample ballot because there's so many elections you don't think about. And that goes back, I need to make a chart about how much government we have, because it's insane.
More is not always better, right?
No,
so that's when you're talking about how do these people that are not residents slip through, is because because we're now so large that personalization is now software based. So that's where that's an administrative glitch. I don't think that that's a party intentional glitch. I think that's just because the system is so large, that's the necessity, and that's the software necessity. Is that something that we can transition out of in technology? I'm sure. Are we answering or trying to answer a question we don't have the ability to answer? Probably, but that is what strives to answer it. So just like I used to have to sit and hand sort through, write-ins, it's now scanned and already taken care of for me. That transition will come. There's always the discomfort of change.
Yeah.
But for Michigan, I don't think that you're going to see that much change.
Yeah.
And how it impacts your ability to walk into a poll and vote. If you've done your due diligence, there's rights and responsibilities as a voter.
Now, part of Trump's executive order is that he wants to require, proof of citizenship to register to vote, but it's with the national voter registration. And we talked about this before we were recording. We don't really know the difference between the national and the state because, again, states run elections. Now, I've read every single one of Trump's executive orders, and I can tell you his administration does things on purpose to trigger lawsuits, because eventually it'll make its way up to the Supreme Court, usually for contentious stuff like this, and they will make their opinion. So I think he's just doing that to trigger a Supreme Court opinion. I don't think the administration actually thinks they have the right to force states to check for citizenship.
I That is a question above my pay grade.
Like I said, and I know you can't talk about politics.
And I realize that, and I can appreciate that, because you would hope that the structure that we have created to uphold the tenets of the laws that we set forth, starting with the Constitution, are going to be upheld in some way. So that's where I believe, and that's, when you talk in politics, is where the social and behavioral part of those occurrences. I don't even know how to phrase it properly, but there's always an influence. And now that our technology has come as far as it has, and the ability to reach and touch information almost instantaneously, and to be able to comment on it and have discourse about it, has changed the way we do everything. And it has changed the way that we feel about everything, and has allowed some undue influence on administrative processes, but forgetting again that we are doing something that is essentially, this is what makes you an American.
Yeah. And they used to have parades on voting day.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
We used to celebrate.
Well, I'm glad now that Michigan, they closed schools now. That was a welcome change for us that administer.
Now we just need it to be a federal holiday.
Yeah.
Like everyone needs to be out of work and stuff. And
I agree.
We need a party.
I mean, I feel every American I'm sure would agree. And I know that that we strive. That's why there's that early voting. That's why there's the absent voter ballots, is to give the voter every opportunity to exercise that right. While in a perfect world, every American would be able to sleep in and leave their home, or have to catch the bus, or have to do a ride share to get to the polls, or, walk and join family to be able to access that day. There's nothing like voting at the polls on election day. It's a whole vibe.
Yeah.
It's a whole experience of its own. At least it is for our community.
Yeah. So tell me about the actual machines. Like, what do you know about them? How do you guys get them? Where do they come from?
So we actually received those in 2018, I believe. Christy would know exactly when.
And we keep them. Like, they're not like...
They're ours.
Okay.
They're ours. The only thing that we return back to Oakland County is the Fire Stick inside. And so that's what holds the digital information, and that's always on lock and key. So that goes in a locked transfer case.
Okay.
From our office, from the polls the day of to our office, from our office to the county. It's held there, and it's returned under lock and key back to us.
Gotcha.
So that is another form of oversight and protection to that small piece of a larger puzzle. Those hold all of the information that's on the ballot. So that's the digital form of the ballot. It's what counts. It does all the things. Now the ballot machine itself is ours. We have one that's assigned to each precinct. Then you have your extra just in case. They are all tested for every election. There's ballot testing. So they prove not only the integrity and the votability of the ballot, but the integrity of the machine. And by that time, usually, luckily enough for us, because we are a small CVT and we have 4 precincts, we have an intimate relationship with not only our inspectors, but our equipment as well. And our clerk's office is really great about that. Making sure we have up-to-date computers, that all the software is up to date, that their education portion of that is up to date, so that we are never lacking in anything that we need. Those machines for us have been great. The irregularities that you see at the end, like, the off by one, maybe one up, one down, that was almost always the M100. That was like the ballot box. It was always like a connection issue. So now, and I like to think, because of how streamlined our processes are, and because of how good the machines are, we don't have those issues. We don't really have, we're off count. Or that this guy spoiled his ballot and walked out. Or you'll have people that...
dying over there.
I know. You'll have the person on the off chance that just decided halfway through, I'm not even voting, folds it up, puts it in her purse, and walks out. Almost always we can catch that
Okay.
before you even make it out.
Wow.
Because there's such a good process and a way that they're keeping track to know I've got this many people in line and I don't have.
Okay, so you compare how many people check in at the desk to how many are actually counted in the machine.
Yes.
Now, what do you do with the actual paper ballots? Do those
The
get
ballots
stored?
are stored for 22 months following an election.
Okay.
Those are under lock and key. Those are stored in the ballot container with the certified ballot numbers, how many, used, unused. When we open at the polls, I'm sorry, let me back up. When we open polls, the ballots that are delivered to the polls are locked with a state certified security strip with its own, and the container has to be certified by the state.
Okay.
So every now and then they come around and look at all of our ballot containers and make sure that we have canvas ones now, that there's no rips or tears, there's no way that you're accessing, and there's no faulty zippers. There's a whole, Machiavellian way of closing it and sealing it. And then if you didn't do the paperwork right, then you got to open it back up and get new seal and do that all over again. Beforehand, my first election, they were steel boxes, and you were steel boxing it, but they came in and made sure that they weren't rusting. There was no holes, there was no dents. So that even the integrity, there's a whole process for the integrity of the container that holds the ballots beforehand and after.
Gotcha.
So now that we've voted the election, we take the ballots out, we organize them, we put them back in the ballot container. We put the unused, unvoted ballots in that same container. And then we go ahead and go about the sealing process. Then that is housed under lock and key by the clerk's office for 22 months.
So does everyone I'm assuming the county and everyone uses the same machines that they're able to talk to each other?
Each county so the state of Michigan received a grant from the federal government, I believe in 1617, with the purchase that allowed the states to make the choice for themselves of what machines they were going to allow their CVTs to choose from.
Okay.
In the state of Michigan, because I can't speak to any other state, in the state of Michigan, I believe that there was a choice of 3. Mm-hmm. And the county would choose for their CVTs.
Gotcha.
So our county chose, I believe it's the Hart model, and it's been absolutely fantastic. It shows you the total number of ballots that have been voted by that machine collectively. So you know how long that machine's been there, how many votes have passed through that machine. And you can look at it when you go and put your ballot into it. It tells you the number of ballots that are voted on that day, the date of the election, the time. So that way you know. And then there's always a tape. Never rip the tape off. Never rip the tape off. Don't be a good Samaritan. We know it's there. It's supposed to be there. Please don't rip it off. So there's the zero tapes. So the first when we're opening polls, we have to run a zero tape that proves to the Board of Canvassers, to the clerk, to the general public that this machine started at 0 today for this election. This tape says Tuesday, November 6th, whatever year, this CVT, this precinct, this time.
Gotcha.
And then that way I can show not a single ballot passed through this today. And so that's where that early voting had to be under the new election law. That's why it had to be passed that's why the law had to be changed to allow that. But that allows them to actually put that ballot into the machine up to 9 days prior to election day.
Okay. So the early voting, who counts the early votes?
So we have election inspectors specifically devoted from our CVT at the chosen election or early voting locations.
Okay.
So we partnered with our county for them to host at their locations.
Okay.
So just like we would with our AV precinct, they are hosting, they have the oversight, their professionals are there looking after our election inspectors for our CVT early voting. Because we don't have that staff. I can't clone myself and then be at an early voting station for 9 days prior to an election that I need to be in my office processing AV ballots for the election. Getting all the getting the food orders together. Our clerk's office is absolutely fantastic. And I would say probably every CVT, their clerk's office are under a great amount of, this is party planning at a mass scale. Everybody's having the same party. Everybody tweaks it a little bit differently, but everybody has to do the same things.
Yeah.
And I would recommend to the Michigan.gov, the state of Michigan election handbook is available to everybody. It'll give you all the dates and give you all of the information for whether it's a city, a village, a township, library board, council, parks. It'll give you all the dates and it'll give you the MCL that is attached to that date. Michigan elections is very accessible from the palm of your hand. Oh, you can find almost all of this information somewhere.
Yeah.
As well as the election inspector training modules, I'm sure that is easily accessible somewhere. So that if you really wanted to take a look at what we're looking at what we're preparing our people for, it's right there. Mm-hmm. If you go looking for it, it's there. And I bet you, if not, call your county elections department. And they've got it. They'll send it to you.
So what do you say to people who think that elections are rigged?
I say, because I had this discussion with my mother-in-law, actually. It would have to be on a mass scale at all levels. Mm-hmm. So for me, it would have to lie within the machine. Because you would have to infiltrate so many people. For your local clerk to allow a federal influence on her or his election, his or her integrity, statutory duties that they have sworn an oath to uphold, would have to happen at not only your local but your county and your state, because you figure the CYA that a local clerk would have to do to influence, and what juice is worth that squeeze on a local level. So you would hope as an American that they were just as much of an American, that integrity was just as important to them.
Would you like to see anything change in our elections? Is there anything like the public can advocate for? Like, is there anything you would like to see different?
It's there's so many levels to that question. I would like to see the QVF get a larger server so that it could move a little bit smoother, knowing that,
what is that, QVF?
So QVF is the qualified voter file.
Okay.
So this is the operating software that we are all using. So every CVT that is using the qualified voter file, so you imagine every CVT in the state of Michigan is on this software all at once trying to do the same job.
Gotcha.
We have just the wealth of that and the necessity to be able to move quickly through that so I would wish that they would be able to invest in a larger server so that could move a little smoother. But in all, as a administrator, I'm pretty satisfied, but I think that's because I'm fortunate to live and operate and administrate in a small town. I think it would be much more difficult if I was in a large Detroit, for example. It would be, but you would have more people. So that's where their election departments are huge. They have hundreds of elections inspectors, and I'm sure that the turnover is great there. But fortunately, I am, small town America. I'm overly grateful every day for that. And the opportunity to be able to impact the way that our voters vote and the ease that they get to, to be able to say, oh, it's just so lovely. Every time we come, we're just in and out. It's so great.
Yeah.
That's how it should be, because then they're going to come back. That's the consistent product will keep them coming back. And when they have to stand in line and it's hot and the people don't really know what they're doing because they're new, or maybe they're just overtaxed with too many abilities because there's not another level of oversight or management within that. So maybe that's one. Maybe that where there was an encouragement in elections to have on-site election day chief inspectors that do that management piece to take the complex things about election day and own them so that the average election inspector doesn't have to do that.
Gotcha.
It would really help to streamline, and you would think that would be even more impactful in those larger CVTs that have multiple polling locations. I only have one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fortunate there too.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, if there's one thing you want to leave people with, if there's one thing you want people to know, what is it?
Well, vote and vote often. And that, call your clerk's office. It's really easy to answer your questions if you call and ask them, or if you email them. I can easily supply you with links and information and FOIA requests and anything that you need if you give us a call. It's a lot harder to take it from social media. That communication piece is, unless you have somebody devoted to that position that can disseminate those requests for information or those topics and let the administration know that there's a community request for information, then you can match that with your communication piece on your government social media. But it's easiest to call and ask, and it's available to you in so many forms, from social media to emailing to calling to public comment at your local municipal meetings. There is so many ways to be involved that are outside of voting, but I think that the most impactful thing that you can do is vote, and vote responsibly. Research what you're voting on. I'm a huge advocate for research. You have the ability in the palm of your hand to answer most questions. And if you know how to Google, you'll get better and better information as you become more discerning about what actually matters to you and where your vote lies. Learning that about your local level is the most important. And so I hope that for everybody, when your local elections are up, call the offices and talk to the people and see what are they working on.
Yep.
Very rarely in small government is it ever going to be political. It's going to be about the social and economic development of their community and where they think those energies need to be directed. Now, there can be differences of opinion, but almost always it's going to be for the greater good. So where we escape that, or where people lose focus on that, is personal to them as you climb that ladder of government. But you would hope, and as an American, I have to hope that everybody involved is wanting to uphold the Constitution with as much vigor as I do.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And I thank you for saying research, because that's my thing is research. And
ask questions. You have the right.
Most people vote either down ballot or by name recognition, and we got to stop doing that. Yes. We need to research, and sometimes it's not always, you can't get political, but I can. It's not always going to be what party, it's your party's not always right. So sometimes you need to go across the aisle if that person is going to be better for the job, and put your values, your community's values in front of their own needs, I guess, egos.
Well, I think that if you do the research and you find where their motivations are or what, makes them tick, you're going to see that when they're in those seats, where their energies are going to be directed. If you have someone mindful of natural resources, you're probably going to be, rest assured that they're going to be a good steward of your land and water. And we live in a state where that is imperative. And, we can get into how, eagles and, it's all small towns. And I learned that I was in Washington, D.C. recently, and you see a lot of the same faces because it's a really big, small town.
Wow.
People that have dedicated their lives to being in those seats to be able to do those jobs, from the aides, that dedicated their college experiences and their family's money and FAFSA and all that to get to be able to take part in that system, to the senator that's been there for a few terms, and it's right down to local government, same thing. You will see turnover, but if you're lucky, you'll have people that invest, or at least, administrators that'll invest in their position and making sure that there's a consistent product for their residents.
And all politics is local, is what they say. So, Amy, where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Well, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I have a TikTok account, but I don't TikTok. I live a small town life, and I really try to keep it small town.
Yeah.
My husband's a business owner, and I have, children and families and all of that good stuff. So I live my life right here in my community, and I appreciate everyone that takes the time to make sure that everybody outside of my community knows about what's going on. I thank you for this. This is great work that anybody can do. Not anybody can do, but I mean anybody should be doing.
Yeah.
They should be talking about these things and investigating them and putting on the education pieces to make sure that everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah, and that's why I am just so excited to have my show, because I talk to normal people. Like some people are like scared to like approach me to be on the show because they think they have to like be some big person. And I'm like, nope, I've talked to moms, farmers, lawyers, veterans. Like I just talk to normal people.
Well, we all have a part to play, right? So we're all in the same, we're all in it together, and we all have a part within the system. It's an ecosystem. You can get really philosophical about it and how each one of us plays a part, but definitely for small town elections, I mean, the difference of one vote can be the difference of impacting an entirely, an established system, or rocking it and changing an established system. So it's imperative that we explore the rights and the responsibilities that we have as American voters.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Amy. And if anyone else is interested on being on the show, you can go to annamatson.com. I have annamatson.com/podcast. So that's where you can find all the episodes and you can apply to be on the show. And all you have to do is have a good story. If people only knew, what do you want people to know? Make sure you subscribe, follow, all the things. And again, Amy, thank you so much. I learned so much today.
All right. Oh, yeah. I appreciate it. I very rarely get to, go on and on about elections.
I learned a lot, though, but thank you.
I could go on another 8 hours, I'm sure.
Well, we'll get you home to your husband, though.
Thank you. I'm sure he'll appreciate that.
Okay, bye.